Heard on Thursdays with Nikki is about to go live online. Catch HOT, the iconic radio show that made Philippine FM radio talk, every Thursday on the Monster. Streaming video on the Monster Facebook page at RX931, the Monster YouTube channel at RX931, and twitch.tv/Monster RX931. Heard on Thursdays host, Nikki Porter. Stand by and enjoy the program.
Hello and good evening, Monsters. My name is Nikki Porter, and welcome to the show that made Philippine FM radio talk that's heard on Thursdays on the Monster. Tonight, in celebration of 75 years of diplomatic relations between the Philippines and the Republic of Korea, the Philippine Embassy in Korea published a book entitled Dayo, Days of Migration. And that tells the inspiring stories of 40 migrants from the Philippines and Korea. To talk more about this book, we have a special guest joining us on the show. She's a 30-year veteran in the Philippine Foreign Service with postings in Mexico, Hong Kong, the United Kingdom, previously the ambassador to the Federal Republic of Germany, and consul general in New York. Currently, she is serving as the Philippines ambassador to the Republic of Korea. Throughout her postings, she oversees and articulates Philippine policies, advocacies, and initiatives in major areas of cooperation and engagement, with focused engagement in the areas of gender and development, migration, climate change, green technology, and maritime cooperation. She has also served as acting vice minister for administration in the Department of Foreign Affairs and chief coordinator of the Office of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs under several foreign secretaries of the Philippines. An alumna of the University of the Philippines, Queen's University in Canada, Ateneo de Manila University School of Law, and the University of Hong Kong, our guest tonight is also a polyglot, fluent in Filipino, English, Spanish, French, and German. Heard on Thursdays, let's welcome to the show Ambassador Theresa Dizon-de Vega. Welcome to the show!
Thank you very much, Nikki, and to all the listeners of RX93.1 and, of course, the Heard on Thursdays program. It's really an honor and a privilege for me to be joining you all today.
Oh, well, the honor is all mine, Ambassador, and welcome once again to the show, our Ambassador of the Philippines to the Republic of Korea. So first of all, congratulations on the launch of the commemorative book that made the Embassy of the Philippines in Seoul publish the entitled Dayo, Stories of Migration. So let's talk about that now. What inspired the Philippine Embassy in Korea to publish this book on the stories of Filipino and Korean migrants?
Well, in commemorating 75 years of diplomatic relations, the Philippines was actually the fifth country in the world to recognize the Republic of Korea, or, most people know it as South Korea. Mm-hmm. We were the fifth country in the world to recognize it as an independent country back in 1949, on March 3, 1949 to be exact. And so we've been commemorating this milestone year, 75 years of relations. And at the heart of our relationship with Korea really has been the enduring friendship between Filipinos and Koreans. From the time we took part in the Korean War in the 1950s, through our respective stages of development and progress, and then on to contemporary times, the people-to-people relations really have been at the heart of this long-lasting partnership. And so we wanted to give tribute to that. We wanted to focus on it and hopefully make people more aware of the special relationship we have and the contributions that Filipinos have made here in Korea and that Koreans have made in the Philippines through the stories of about 40 wonderful individuals who agreed to be part of this project.
Yeah. And I think it's such a beautiful, collaboration, because for many of us Filipinos, probably we didn't even know we had this kind of relationship with Korea. At the very most, we had, our relationship to Korea would have been limited, at least our knowledge to, K-pop, K-drama. But it actually dives deeper than that. And I think this book will be able to explore further on how deep the connection is in our relations, diplomatic or otherwise, with Korea. So could you walk us through the process of developing this book? For example, how were the 40 migrants chosen for this book?
Well, we had, when we were conceptualizing it, we had this grand idea of having 75 stories.
Okay.
Like 75 Filipinos, 75 Koreans. But then we realized that in terms of logistics and time and resources, that may have been too tall an order. So we sort of leveled our expectations and we focused on having at least 40 stories of migration. And what we did was we wanted to touch on various areas or sectors where there's been a lot of engagement through the years. So we actually divided the book into several chapters or sections. So there are Filipinos and Koreans who we viewed mainly as community builders. So these are people who've been doing a lot of community engagement and community work in both countries. A lot of them doing a lot of civic work, also in charity work. And then we also had a section on those who are promoting multiculturalism or greater cultural understanding between our two peoples and countries. And then we had thought leaders, people in the academe, in the research areas, students, professors, and also creative champions. So Filipinos and Koreans who are excelling in their respective fields, in the creative sector, like in the food industry, chefs, in media, in acting, in sports, these diverse fields. And we also have a section on people we call industry drivers, meaning these are the people who have helped strengthen the economies of both countries. And they include our overseas workers, business owners, those in the small and medium enterprises, in social enterprises, and those who've been involved in the manufacturing industry, for example. So we wanted to give readers really an idea of the very broad range of areas where we've had these people-to-people engagements through the years.
I see. And so just to clarify with what you said, initially you said it was they wanted to have 75
75 or
response.
75.
Yes, yeah, for Filipinos and Koreans. And I am just realizing now, so it's like you're also sharing the stories of Koreans who migrated to the Philippines.
Yes, exactly.
Very interesting. And so for you as an ambassador as well, like for this undertaking or for this launching of a book, what does that mean for you as the ambassador to Korea?
Well, it's very significant in the sense that if you really look at it, on a much deeper level, diplomats like myself, government representatives like myself, we come and go. We stay for a few years. We work on certain initiatives and projects, and then we have to move on to the next assignment, wherever that is. That will be it. The same is true for my other colleagues in government who are currently representing our country here in Korea. But the Filipino community members and the Koreans who are in the Philippines, they're the ones who stay on for many years. In fact, for some of them, they've made either the Philippines or Korea their second home. And so in effect, they are the longer serving ambassadors in a more general sense because they represent each other's countries' culture, traditions, values. And so I think it's very necessary to recognize these things, and they work in different fields. And so it's a very diverse type of interaction with societies in the Philippines and in Korea. So we wanted to pay tribute to that. We wanted to drive home the point that people are a very important part of the relationship, of building a relationship with another country. It's not just the official engagement, visits by very prominent people, high level people, business missions. It's also the day-to-day interaction which really builds this sense of connection between different people and different cultures.
Yeah. And that's actually a very beautiful way of putting it, mentioning that, these migrants are in fact, they're the more permanent ambassadors of their countries to wherever it is that they move to. And it makes a lot of sense as well, considering that you mentioned that the day-to-day is as just as important, if not more important, in maintaining these relations, because these are, kind of like boots on the ground relationships that that are formed and are sustained the longer that they stay in a particular country. And so for this particular book, what was the inspiration behind naming it Dayo? I'm pretty sure it was like, it's a root word of dayuhan, which is foreigner, but just for monsters and listeners who are tuned in, how did it come to that point of naming it Dayo, Days of Migration?
Well, we had a wonderful team working on this book, and during the brainstorming sessions, what were we going to call it? And the group felt that dayo is a word in our language, in Filipino, which sort of encapsulates the sense of going somewhere different. So, or experiencing something different, or being someone who's different. So, as you mentioned, dayo has a connection to the word dayuhan, or a foreigner, or a migrant. Dayo also has connections to phrases like dun sa ibang dayo, o sa ibang lugar, or a different place, there in that different place, or dumayo ka, to go somewhere. It also gives a sense of movement, and this is what migrants do. They move, and they have engagements and experiences in other groups, in other parts of the world, in other communities. And so we wanted to give a sense of that, building a community of people, and honoring this community of people who've moved, who've added this sense of movement to their lives.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that there are a lot of migrants in the world, but of course, and no story is ever the same. And I think that's also what we could expect from the book as well. So what would be some of the common themes that readers would find in the stories that are featured in Dayo?
Well, I think the age-old story of migration, the elements are all there, but there are differences and there are nuances in the individual stories. One is there's always a push factor in all these stories. Why did this individual, why did this lady, or why did this gentleman move to another place? And for some of our contributors, like our youngest contributor is a 15-year-old, is now a 15-year-old student, Filipino Korean student in the Philippines. He moved. Many of them, moved because of their families moving. Is it okay to mention particular names, for example?
No worries. Yeah, go ahead.
Like, for example, a well-known media personality in the Philippines for many years now, Sam Oh. You may be familiar with her. She moved to the Philippines because her family happened to move to the Philippines when she was quite young. And so there are these factors, and some leave for economic reasons, for professional reasons, for love. Some of them move for because of relationships. So there's that common thread, but there's also a very common thread of challenges and adversities that each of them faced. But eventually at the end, a sense of accomplishment, and also a very strong sense of resiliency, of being able to, face all these challenges, and to work within what you have, and to be resourceful. I think our readers will find a lot of inspiration from the stories of these individuals.
I'm sure, because it's very hard to uproot your entire life, your family, even to go to another country for better opportunities, if ever. And this is something that's very deeply personal to a lot of Filipinos, who have thought about it, have thought about maybe going to another country, seeing what's probably out there. And so in creating this book, what were some of the most fulfilling or maybe some of the most challenging aspects in order to accomplish this project?
Well, one was to narrow down the
Mm.
people whose stories are actually featured in the book. By the way, the book is a dual language book. So half of it is in English, and the other half is the Korean language version. So it's a dual language book. So that was one. Trying to pin down because we needed representative people for each of the sections we wanted to build, each of the sectors we felt had to be represented. Of course, some agreed, some did not agree. So we went through several lists, of course, and we gave them guide questions. One of the challenges, of course, is when a contribution comes back, and sometimes people get excited and they want to tell their story, and some of them. I think mainly because they were so inspired or so excited, they didn't really answer the quiet questions. So that was one of the challenges, so you have to remind them, could we get some insights from you on this particular question in
Mm.
guide questions, that kind of thing. Of course, time is always a challenge, meeting deadlines, and people are very busy. Practically all the individuals in the book, there are very few who are no longer working full time. Very, very few. Most of them are working. They have careers or they're studying, doing a lot of things. So that was another challenge also, making sure that we stick to the deadlines, which is true of any project. But it was a fun process. I'll be very honest. There were times when the editorial team was quite stressed out, but I think it was fuel for for getting the work done even better.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm sure the result was kind of like a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh, finally, we've
But
gotten it
did
done.
it?
Yeah.
It's a lot like our editor in chief for the project, Ms. May Yang, said during her launch remarks. It was like really giving birth. It was a birthing process in itself.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And it's like, I think
It's our
as with
baby.
any book as well. Yeah. And so, what were there any steps, I suppose, like that you had to take in terms of selecting? Because okay, you mentioned you had these guide questions that they had to respond to, and some of them probably digressed from the answers or from the questions rather. So, like, what steps were taken in selecting and compiling these stories, and was there any collaboration with like historical experts probably to ensure cultural accuracy, or were you just reliant more on the stories that they were willing to tell?
Since these were mainly personal narratives, I mean,
Mm.
they were very personal, individual narratives. We didn't really think too much of the historical or the cultural. But of course, there were certain guidelines, a certain tone of writing your contribution, which which would have been needed in terms of getting the book out there for public consumption. But it was, since it's more of a personal book and personal stories, we that didn't weigh too heavily on us. But we did have some contributors to the book. For example, one of our contributing writers rather, her story is not really in the book, but she wrote something for one of the chapters, and this is a former member of the Korean Parliament, who happens to be Filipino Korean, Miss Jasmine Lee. She is the first and only non-ethnic Korean member of the National Assembly of Korea, and has been a long-time multicultural advocate in Korea, and has served on various government bodies here in Korea. And so she gave some interesting insights on how Filipinos, for example, are perceived in Korea, how much has developed over the years, and of course the challenges that remain. for the overseas Filipino community in Korea. So that was very helpful in terms of the process for us. And
Okay.
we did have some professors also on board and advising us on the project.
I see. So, with the book, and also with your experience so far as ambassador to Korea, in what ways have Filipino migrants contributed to Korean society, and vice versa?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we came up with various sectors or areas. One is community advocacy work. We do have a lot of Filipinos, quite a number of Filipinos based here in Korea. Some of them marriage migrants, meaning they're married to Korean nationals who've actually been very active in community building. Some of them are advisors or consultants or assistants or work for foreign resident centers here in Korea as counselors, as translators, as program directors. A very well known place in Korea. Which a lot of Filipinos, I think, know Itaewon, the Itaewon area. It's known internationally. The Itaewon Global Center, its current director, the head of the Itaewon Global Center, is actually a Filipina,
Wow.
Catherine Corteza, whose story is also part of the book. And it's interesting to see how Filipinos are part of the formation of a growing multicultural community and also a growing multicultural outlook in Korea. So that's one way. We have industry drivers. We have business owners, Filipino business owners here in Korea. We have our overseas workers under the employment permit system who've been, contributing to the growth of the Korean manufacturing sector for over 2 decades now since the EPS system was founded, and they're cited by their employers, by the companies they work for, as being highly skilled, very professional, and dedicated people, and which is really necessary for an economy like Korea, which is heavily industrialized to maintain its place among the major economies in the world, and. People may not be aware of this, but we do have quite a number of Filipino academics teaching in various universities and schools in Korea. In fact, they have their own organization, the Association of Filipino Educators in Korea. And
Wow.
they're quite active. Actually, their current president, Professor Cheryl Lee Lagrimas, who is who is one of our editorial writers, is a full-time professor at one of the major universities here in Korea. So there are quite a number of them. So they're contributing to the scholarship, the research, the teaching development here in Korea in many fields, from sports science to information technology, to international business,
Wow.
to English language and literature, and so many other fields. And then we have creative champions. We have actually a growing community of creatives, Filipino creatives here in Korea. Some of them appear in major Korean dramas and films. Some of them are influencers. Some of them work in as MCs and as presenters in programs and as models. And so there's a lot going on here. You'd be surprised. Filipinos would be surprised how well their kababayans are doing here in Korea.
Yeah, and I think many of us probably have seen these actors also in K drama.
Yeah.
I've seen editorials interviewing them, also asking how they got recognized, how they got approached, and all these things. And sometimes because of that one story, a lot of us will probably assume that they're like it's like a one in a million kind of situation, when in fact there are so many areas and sectors, as you mentioned, in which we can enter, we can contribute in, should we consider, right? An opportunity in Korea, should an opportunity present itself. there. So I think it's a really nice reality check for many of us, considering like we think that it's very hard to try and seek out opportunities in Korea, especially for those who are very much in love with the culture as well in
Yeah.
Korea.
Yes, but I always say there's a lot of hard work, but
Mm,
you have to come in with a dose of reality also.
sure, yeah,
Real life is very different from what you see on screen,
right.
but if you have the inclination, then there are ways to pursue it, and to pursue it in such a way that you'll be able to have some measure of accomplishment,
Mhm.
but also at the same time making sure that your welfare is looked after. That's the most important thing for us.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And so, how has the relationship been with the Philippines and Korea? It's been for 75 years already, since 1949, as you mentioned, or yes, 1949. And so, how has this relationship further developed over the years?
Well, when I mentioned about sending troops during the Korean War, when we were one of the countries, one of the sending states to the Korean War, that really actually cemented our relations. Because to this day, to this very day, if you meet a Korean and you mention the Philippines, they will always mention that, oh, you took part in the Korean War, and they will thank you for it. And it is really a genuine sense of appreciation for
Yeah.
the sacrifices of, in our case, 7,420 soldiers who joined the Philippine Expeditionary Task Force to Korea. The most prominent of them being the former late Philippine President Fidel V. Ramos. Who took part in the Korean War. Actually, his first combat experience was in Korea. And for that, he received one of the highest honors from the Korean government. Um, and since that time, the relationship has progressed. We've been a part of each other's challenges in terms of achieving development and progress through the decades. And Korea today is one of the Philippines' top partners in terms of foreign direct investment. They're in the top five. One of our top trade partners, also in the top 10, also one of our top official development assistance partners in terms of development cooperation. And of course, for the last 6 years, or so, the number one source of foreign visitors or tourists to the Philippines. One out of every four foreign visitor to the Philippines is Korean.
Oh, wow.
So this is very important, I
Yeah.
think, and it's really further proof of the comfort we have with each other in terms of the comfort level of Koreans visiting different places in the Philippines, and of Filipinos in increasing numbers now going to Korea, likely because of the popularity of the Hallyu wave, or what we call Korean content, K content, K food, K
Mhm.
beauty, K fashion, all these things in the last few years, particularly during the pandemic. So
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. And last year, we elevated our relations to a strategic partnership, which provides further impetus for closer engagement. And we implemented, starting December 31st last year, 2024, the Philippines Korea Free Trade Agreement. So these are two really major milestones in our relations: the strategic partnership and the free trade agreement, the FTA, between our two countries.
That's amazing, and it's just a testament, I guess, to the almost 8 decades of relations between the two nations, so for sure, in further bolstering also our alliance, our relationship with one another as well. So. For Filipino migrants in Korea and Korean migrants in the Philippines, are there some initiatives in place to further support them and their relocation, in their settling in to the respective nations that they're moving to?
I do know that the Embassy of Korea in the Philippines has programs for its nationals who are living there or working there or studying in the Philippines. On our part, we do have quite an extensive menu, if you will, of programs and initiatives for our overseas community here. We do have a regular program of post-arrival orientation seminars. In the past, it's catered mostly to the employment permit system workers or EPS workers. These are our kababayans who work in different factories and companies here in Korea. But we've since expanded it to include more focused post-arrival seminars for marriage migrants who came to Korea mainly because of marriage, because they married the Korean national. We've also extended it in terms of holding similar sessions for Filipino students here in Korea to help them adjust and, of course, to update them on what's happening for professors and teachers here in the Philippines. So we hold these post-arrival seminars. We do have something which is unique to the Philippine Embassy in Korea. We have what we call the Peak Pinoy, that's PEAK, Peak Pinoy, which is an entrepreneurship program, which is in support of the Philippine government's reintegration program for returning migrants to the Philippines. So, the Migrant Workers Office, the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration here in Korea, the Philippine Department of Trade and Industry Office here, Agriculture Office, and also the Philippine Tourism Office here in Korea. We're very fortunate we have all these other agencies represented here. We do a quarterly seminar focusing on entrepreneurship opportunities and financial management and opening a business and related topics for our community members in different
Wow.
fields, whether it's agriculture, tourism. You want to set up a bed and breakfast when you go back, or you want to set one up which your family members can take care of while you're still working overseas, or you want to go into smart agriculture or
Yeah.
invest in real estate, or set up your small business or an SME. Then we invite experts in these particular fields to provide information and guidance to our Filipino community. We have a Know Your Rights and Responsibilities series also, which we also do quarterly. And it's essentially a series on both Philippine and Korean laws in different fields, from family and personal family relations to inheritance, to real estate laws, to land titles, to also domestic violence laws, all these things, and investments, financial literacy. We do it under the Know Your Rights and Responsibilities. And of course, we have our regular cultural events for the second generation Filipino Koreans. We started in 2023 a summer school at the embassy, Eskwelahan sa Embahada, where they get to understand more about the Philippine side of their culture. And we invite their Korean father or mother to take part in it also, so they also get to learn more about the culture of their spouse's country. So we do
Yeah.
all the, and we also do in the summer we do a Palarong Pinoy, so a Philippine sports and family day where we introduce popular Philippine games, street games, for example, and also
Yeah.
other kinds of games for both young and old.
Yeah, I love that there's such an extensive, lineup of things that you make sure that you cater to in different aspects for, Filipino migrants as well, and for, especially the second generation Filipino Koreans, let's say, who are staying there as well. What actually stood out for me was the peak Pinoy and how it was. Um, what do you call this? It was promoting, a sense of like entrepreneurship, trying to push our migrants to start a business or support one at least here in the Philippines. Why do you think that's important? To take that avenue of entrepreneurship as someone who might be moving back to the Philippines, coming from Korea, for example.
Well, essentially, it's aligned with the purpose of reintegration, meaning we would like to see the day, and that's always been the philosophy of the government, where migration becomes a choice and not a necessity.
Yes.
Where you're going for, because you want further exposure, but it's not a matter of survival or life or death for you, or you need to do it because of your family. We'd like our kababayans to get to a point where they now have a choice. And to help them make that choice, it's always better for them to have a source of income that they can grow. And it also helps to promote a culture of savings and investment. And people say that there are other countries, other societies which are better at business than Filipinos. I don't think so. I think we've had so many success stories of Filipino entrepreneurs that anyone can be an entrepreneur. That's what we want to inculcate in them. And we've actually had some success stories of Filipinos who used to work and live in Korea, who have since gone back and have set up their own business or have engaged in investments, and they're very happy. And when you're able to replicate this kind of success, then you actually strengthen the country's economic base also as a
Yeah.
whole.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great initiative. I've never heard of that before, but I think it's just it gives Filipino migrants like agency also and what to do moving forward. Should they move, what happens next, right? When you move back. So it gives them that avenue to explore. Should they be interested in, becoming an entrepreneur eventually. Now, so what role does cultural exchange play in strengthening diplomatic ties between two nations?
Oh, culture is very important. Culture goes to the very heart, really, of building relationships, uh, building friendships, enduring friendships. And part of cultural exchange is also, of course, communicating the values of your country, of your people, of your society. In terms of Korea and the Philippines, we share values in terms of democracy, respect for human rights, and for the rule of law, but also a very strong tradition of indigenous culture, which we would like to share. So, as much as possible, we're trying to do that. In fact, this month, which is actually Philippine National Arts Month, February, we've had several activities already. Just about a week ago, in collaboration with one of the largest publishing firms in Korea. One of and Their foundation arm, the Hansi Yes 24 Foundation. We launched three books. Two books by Philippine National Artist for Literature, Nick Joaquin, and one book by a popular contemporary novelist, Mika de Leon. The Korean language versions of their works were launched just about a week ago, Valentine's Day, actually,
Oh,
here in Seoul. And so we're very proud of that. We feel that that's a way to reach out more to our Korean friends and a different audience. And also later this month, this week, actually starting this week, the renowned Philippine madrigal singers, the Mads, will be performing in three cities in Korea, but primarily in Jeju, where they are the guest featured choir for the Jeju International Choral Festival. So it's I think it's a wonderful way to reach new audiences and to communicate the wonderful things about our culture and about our artists also.
absolutely. And also For the monsters, for example, who are listening, and especially our young listeners as well, who are maybe aspiring, maybe are curious about what it is like to be a diplomat, for example. Um, was public service something that you always dreamt of becoming an ambassador? Has that been a life goal of yours, or how did it come to be for you?
Well, to be very honest, whenever I'm asked this kind of question during interviews, I always say I'm an accidental diplomat. I started, but I've always been in public service. I've
Mm,
actually never really worked for full time for the private sector. I
mm,
started out as a faculty member of the University of the Philippines in Diliman, which is my alma mater, and then after a few years there and getting a graduate degree overseas, I came back and just took the competitive foreign service officer examination on a just just on a whim. I didn't really
mhm.
prepare. I made it, and I thought, let me see, let me try this out for a few years. But I ended up staying for, and now I'm now in my 31st year as a
Mhm.
as a diplomat.
So,
For those who are interested, it's not all glamour.
mm,
Glamour has little to do with it, actually. We're just placed in some situations where we have to project a certain level of representation.
sure, yeah.
But there's a lot of work um, that goes behind the scenes. We negotiate, we push for Philippine interests in many fields, in political and security and defense. We do a lot of trade and investment promotion. There's also, of course, cultural programs, and people-to-people exchanges, labor and the welfare of our overseas Filipinos. We also, of course, do frontline services
Mm,
for both Filipino clients here, for members of our community when they need new passports, and also for the
mm,
international community when they need visas to go to the Philippines, for example. And we act as the civil registrar for Filipinos overseas. So there's a lot of work. We do a lot of assistance to nationals work. Um, Unfortunately, we do have to visit also and look after the welfare of some of our Filipinos who may be in detention, something
mm,
which we hope will become less and less in the future. But these things do happen. So that's part of our job also. We also evacuate and repatriate Filipinos in many crisis areas in the world whenever necessary. So there's a lot of work to do, but it's also a very exciting profession.
yeah.
And right now, because there's so many challenges that the world faces, the global community faces, for us diplomats, the background of our profession has diversified through the years. Now we have, aside from more traditional professions like lawyers, we have engineers in our ranks. We have climate experts, we have scientists, we have health experts, and that's all very welcome because the world of diplomacy, much like the world in general, faces a lot of challenges in many areas. And so if any of the listeners are interested, just the exam. We give it, we administer the exam every year. They just have to
Mm,
go to the Foreign Affairs website and get the details. I think
very
for this year,
interesting.
concluded the one for this year. So next year.
Oh, okay. So that's such a very interesting observation, or like exploration actually of diplomatic life. And for those who are curious as well, because I feel like a part of what people think, if you're an ambassador, oh, you get to travel, you get to these different countries, but I'm sure don't get to choose where you're going to be assigned. So how long, for example, is your station, and how are you
Oh,
usually assigned to a post as
it's
well?
different for different countries, but in the
Mm,
case of the Philippines, we're usually assigned overseas for about 6 years,
mm,
and the 6 years could be spent in one country. It could be spent in two countries. Very rarely in three. That's very rare, and and it's an exciting thing. And I always tell junior diplomats to experience a mix of regions where you're assigned to. You know, whether it's in North America, the Middle East, the Gulf region, North Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Pacific area, because every country, every posting is unique, and you will, you know, you'll collect all these memories, and you'll gain so much experience from being exposed to a lot of different countries, cultures, people, traditions. It's really a field where you will grow, certainly. There's also the excitement of travel, although I must say, when we travel, it's always with a purpose. These are on a personal mission. Unless you go off on your own at with your own resources on your own
Right.
time. But otherwise, it's work, and it's always for for love of and in service of the country and of the Filipino people. I think that's the most important thing. And you have
Yeah.
to know your first before you go to other countries. Always know your country first and foremost.
Absolutely. And finally, we are nearing the end of the show. But for you, Ambassador Tess, like, what does it mean to be an ambassador? What qualities do you need to have to become a great national representative? If not, at the very least, a good one.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, you have to know and to love your own country, and that includes its history, its traditions, its culture. You have to understand the dynamics of your people, of the national character of your country, in order to represent it, very well. And the second is, I always tell, young diplomats, you need to develop your skills in foreign languages other than English, other
Right.
than English, because language unlocks so much in terms of establishing connections,
Mhm.
particularly in countries where English is not an official language, or English is not
Sure.
widely spoken. Its language is the best entry point to a culture, and to a country and to its people. So try as much as possible to specialize in at least one language other than English. Of course, you are expected to know Filipino
Mhm.
very well. Okay.
Yeah.
And continuous learning and education. And I always say that intellectual curiosity is an essential trait of any diplomat, of anyone who wants to make a connection with another country and another culture. And because, as Filipinos, one very important trait for diplomats, aside from patience and attention to details, and your skills, your professional skills, is empathy, particularly for the members of our diaspora, our overseas community who are out there. Some
Right.
of them are successful. Some of them will need help and assistance as you go along, and it's very important to keep that in mind, because we're also a service oriented. Government, and for the foreign affairs people, it's also a service oriented um, institution.
Thank you once again to Ambassador Tess Dizon-de Vega for her time sharing the Philippine Embassy to the Republic of Korea's initiative of their book project, Dayo, Days of Migration, as well as sharing her knowledge and encouragement on becoming a diplomat and committing to a life of public service. This has been Heard on Thursdays with Nikki Porter. Good night and keep it locked, only here on The Monster.